Okay. Hey, welcome to Stan Energy Man on Friday. Getting ready. It's already halfway through the year. Can you believe it? We're in the middle of June already. Today's show is really kind of interesting, but I wanted to start off a little bit more in the generalized area of making choices. You know, in our country, we kind of pride ourselves in America and the United States of having freedom of choice, freedom to choose, you know, what political party we're going to be in and what social groups we attend and the things that we do. And my question for you today, and the title of our show is, do you really have a choice? You know, we've kind of seen a great political year this year in the primaries with, you know, Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side, you know, really kind of creating a dynamic in the Democratic Party they haven't seen for a long time, and likewise on the Republican side. And it shows a big shift in maybe the American population is finally wising up to the fact that in a lot of cases, they don't have a lot of choice. And they're pushing the envelope here in the elections because they're ready for some change. They see our government not moving fast enough to react to environmental issues, to react to safety and public safety issues. With all the things that went on in Orlando this week, that brought that to a head. There's just so much going on where the public is demanding in the United States to really have more of a choice and to be personally accountable for things. And, you know, in our energy side, that's really what we're demanding too. We're demanding that we have more choices in how we power our homes, whether we come off the grid and use our own solar and our own batteries and capacitors and things, and in transportation where we have a choice in the fuels that we use. And that's where we get into our topic today. So our guest today is Landon Hall from the Fuels Freedom Foundation, and they put together a project, a film called Pump, which we're going to be showing at the State Capitol next week, Wednesday. And we'll have a couple slides come up and show you how you can get a reserved seat in there. And it's a great film. It started when I went to Texas for Earth Day. I picked up a book called Lives Per Gallon. And I don't remember the author. I should bring it in and actually talk about that. But it got us into a discussion in our office where we talked about how we in HCAT should be showing films, you know, in the park or by the zoo or something, just free films that talk about energy and talk about cleaning up our environment and cleaning up transportation. And so one of the young ladies in our office, Christy, went out and she actually rented or got the movie Pump and looked at it and said, hey, that would be a great thing to show. So we looked at it. We spent an afternoon and called it educational training. And sure enough, it was exactly what we're looking for the kind of project we're going to go. So Landon Hall is our guest today from the Fuel Freedom Foundation. Landon, welcome, and thanks for joining us today here on Think Tech Hawaii.
Mahalo to you, Stan. I really appreciate being here, and thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and about how you got involved in the project there at the Fuel Freedom?
Well, my background is in journalism. I was a reporter for the Associated Press for about a decade in Oregon and in New York City. And when I moved here to the West Coast with my family to California, I became a health reporter with the Orange County Register, a newspaper. And that's why I'm, you know, especially interested in a lot of these issues like clean air and respiratory issues and childhood asthma and issues like that. And so I left that job and came here to become a content manager at Fuel Freedom. It's sort of the head writer. And the movie Pump was just starting to be finished up when I came on board. I think that we had just signed Jason Bateman to become the narrator, which is really exciting. And the movie was released a couple months later, 2014, and it was in theaters, and it was a really exciting time. So I guess my involvement was sort of like helping get it to the public, writing advertising copy and answering questions, and help spread the word about it when it made its theatrical run, you know, in New York and here in California and in a lot of states. And we're so thrilled that it's being shown at the state capitol there in Hawaii. I think it's something that everyone should see as part of their education about, you know, fuels and energy in America. And even though the film came out in 2014, it's still very relevant. A lot of the issues are as if they, happened yesterday.
Yeah, and like I say, we watched it as an office, and it dovetails perfectly with what we're trying to do here in Hawaii, for all the same reasons. I don't care what side of the climate change discussion you're on, whether you think it's man-made, man-caused, or whatever, but you certainly wouldn't want to wrap your lips around the tailpipe of the average car and start breathing. So why are we putting that stuff out in the air, no matter whether we see the pollution or we don't see it, or we understand the impact? We just shouldn't be doing it. And so we need to take a look at all the solutions that are available to us and really make a choice or choices that are cleaner for all of us and for our environment. That's another interesting point is that I started off talking a little bit about politics and the point that I noticed a few years ago, maybe 15 or so years ago, every time I tuned into a news broadcast during an election year, the first thing they talked about when they introduced a candidate is how far ahead they were in earning money or raising money for their campaign. And as a guy who grew up in advertising art early in my career, I go, that's just marketing. So are we really electing officials that know what they're doing or have the qualifications, or are we just paying for marketing? And it seems to me more and more apparent that we're just paying for marketing, and we're not necessarily getting high quality people representing us. We're getting high quality marketing that's leading us to choices that maybe aren't the best choices. So what's your view on something like that? Is that...
Well, it's interesting that energy is something that we always hear a lot about during election season, and in particular individual election campaigns, whether it's oil or wind or solar, but it seems to be sort of specific to whatever state they're in. And like when the Iowa caucuses were happening a few months ago, all of a sudden ethanol is a huge national conversation, and then the election cycle moves on to New Hampshire, and you don't hear anything more about ethanol. So, obviously it's a very important election year for the United States, and I think a lot of these energy issues are on people's minds. But there's a lot of important issues out there, including national security and the overall economy. And we think a lot of the issues that are raised in the movie touch on all of these aspects of society about the need to use less oil wherever it comes from. And that could have a lot of benefits, from people's pocketbooks to, strengthening our national security. If oil didn't have the kind of importance, around the world that it does, we could devote more resources and energy in creating jobs here domestically. So, we're happy that, although we don't really get involved with a lot of, political issues as a nonprofit, we're happy that a lot of these topics are on people's minds.
Well, I'm going to have Zuri tee up the trailer for your film here, so we can kind of let everybody see what the movie's about. But before we go there, I'm gonna tell you, I spent 35 years in the military, and one of the things we had to do was, of course, study military history and military strategy and tactics. And there's a gentleman by the name of Baron von Clausewitz from Prussia back in the 1800s, and he had a very good principles of war. And his main focus was that all warfare is just an extension of politics. So when you mention that fuel becoming more and more valuable in a world that is requiring more and more energy to produce the technology and grow the economies of the third world countries that are coming up, the oil becomes a very big political factor. And you're right, this can drive warfare, it can drive a lot, and we need to pay attention to it, not just from an environmental perspective, but the impact that it has on our ability to have a peaceful world. So, exactly. Zuri, if we're ready, can we run that trailer?
$317 million people, 212 million drivers. This is America. But America has been taken for a ride.
There's been a monopoly on the fuel system in this country. The oil companies invented the pump. They control it.
There is no competition.
You gotta choose. Do you want to go to the movies with your kids or do you want to buy gas?
It hurts.
You have the ability to stop using oil right now.
So here we stand. You got God with love in the hand.
All cars run equally well on methanol, ethanol, or gasoline.
The blood, sweat, and tears.
The United States started building flex fuel cars in 1994. There are millions of cars on the road that are flex fuel. The only way you knew you had a flex fuel car is that your gas cap was yellow.
What's the gas station of the future going to look like? It's going to look a lot different than today's. One of the reasons is look at natural gas coming along.
It's cleaner, it's abundant right here in America. It's American.
Until we have a moment of truth with ourselves, this country is destined to not only be addicted to oil, but addicted to all the terrible trappings that come with oil.
What's going to break the monopoly at the pump is entrepreneurs who build alternative distribution.
Spend about $100 a day in gas, now spending about $20.
We're under the impression that you have to change a ton of parts to make this run off of alcohol fuels. That is not true.
It's possible to create compelling, affordable electric cars.
That's the best part about being an American. We don't like it, we'll change it. The technology out there, the know-how is out there. We are going to be able to do this on our own.
So there you go. There's a sneak preview of next Wednesday's showing of Pump at the State Capitol, 6 p.m. And that's pretty exciting stuff. And like I said, I watched the trailer several times, and I see more and more in it every time I watch it. But it's a great film, and we're really looking forward to airing it. So let's go back and talk for just a couple more seconds before we go to break about what it took to make the movie. I know you said you kind of came in at the tail end when we were just bringing in the narration, but can you tell us a little bit about what it took to make the movie in terms of dollars and time and things like that?
Well, the filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca Tickell, they were very experienced with documentary filmmaking and traveling the world to get interviews. I think one of the best things about the film is the breadth. You know, the segment about going to China to talk about the car demand there and how, you know, a sign of the middle class, breaking into the middle class is owning your own car, and how incredibly expensive that is in China, but what a status symbol that is. And Josh and Rebecca, they had made films before kind of about alternative fuel and vehicles. And it's a very polished looking film. And I remember the night of the premiere here in California in Santa Monica talking with them and the writer, and they really put a lot of research, not only into their, all the interviews talking about geopolitical issues and the environment and all these different fuels and how they're made, but also the historical aspect of it, how the oil monopoly got created and sort of entrenched over the past century. And so, from what I understand, we had been working with the filmmakers for quite some time, and they put a couple of years into, gathering that information and shooting it and interviewing people all over the world. And in the United States, you saw a clip about the guy in Oklahoma who makes natural gas conversion kits for vehicles. Just finding people who are engaging, who kind of represent what's going on in America, where people do want and crave choice.
Yeah, and great editing too. I thought it was a really great job editing that piece,
right.
and I think people are gonna love the video. But let's talk a little bit about some of the different things that are in the movie that are showcased. Now, you talked about ethanol, and we talked a little bit before we came on the air that here in Hawaii we have a lot of boats, and ethanol is not necessarily a good word for people that have boats here because
right.
it caused some problems, but along the same lines, I had trouble finding non-ethanol fuel for my boat. And
right.
when it comes down to choice, we should have a choice, whether it's I don't want any ethanol in my fuel or I want 85% ethanol in my fuel. Because we also said I have a truck that's a flex fuel truck, and don't even think about going with more ethanol fuel because I can't get E85 here. So with that and the hybrid technologies, all those things available, what's California doing that's making it more and more, giving you more and more choices, like the film tries to promote?
Well, you're right. We hear from people all the time who are concerned about higher ethanol blends, 10% and above, and about 95% of the country has the E10 for vehicles. And we understand there's an issue not only with boats, but with motorcycles and smaller engines like, yard equipment. And those engines are not, approved for using higher ethanol blends. And we deal mainly with light duty vehicles. And here in California, for instance, there's about 1 million flex fuel vehicles, and in the country about 19 million. And I think that just reflects, the people who want to use that fuel. And that's all we're asking for, and all we push for is to give the consumers a choice, whatever suits their vehicles and their political stance if they have one, their pocketbook. And there are people who kind of insist that using E0 or pure gasoline, if you can find it, that they prefer that. And a lot of older vehicles, like classic cars, they don't have the fuel pumps and the engine components that are compatible with sort of modern blends. E10 is approved for all light duty vehicles. There's a higher blend called E15 that's available in some parts of the country that is approved for vehicles model year 2001 and newer. So I think you're seeing more acceptance, and especially as newer cars with newer fuel lines and other components, they're designed to take higher ethanol blends. And Detroit auto companies, for instance, they have to sell cars all over the world, including in Brazil, where there's a lot of ethanol available in flex fuel vehicles. And as far as E85, there's about 2,600 stations in the country, which is only a fraction of the total number of stations. And as in California, there's a couple of big retailers, but it can be tough to find, which is why I think people who are motivated to seek it out and take advantage of its benefits, kind of have to look sometimes. We have a section on our website, fuelfreedom.org, that kind of shows you a map where you can find it. So there's stations opening up all the time. But yeah, the distribution network is still coming along with different fuel blends being added. In the Midwest, where there's more of an ethanol sort of infrastructure nearby, because they make a lot of it there, because it's corn producing states like Iowa and Illinois and South Dakota, that's where you'll see more choices, more of the fueling station of the future, as we call it in the film. People are able to buy E15 and E20 and E30 depending on whatever they want to use, and that's ultimately where we want to go.
Okay. We're going to take a quick break here and be back in a minute and talk more to Landon Hall from Fuel Freedom Foundation.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm fortunate to be able to host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you'll join in with us every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. to see the interesting people we have to share with you their information. Aloha.
Hi, I'm Ray Starling, and I am co-host for Hawaii's Wednesday afternoon State of Clean Energy. And with me today is Leslie Cole Brooks, and she's going to tell you what's happening this month with our shows.
Hi everybody, I'm Leslie Cole Brooks, the Executive Director of the Distributed Energy Resources Council, and this month the focus is on distributed energy resources. We just had a great show on smart grid technologies, and the rest of the month we're going to discuss storage, different strategies, microgrids, and then we're going to have live man and woman on the street from Verge. So it's really exciting, very informative, lively, and just worth doing. So see you next Wednesday.
Bye.
Hey, welcome back to my lunch hour. Stan, the Energy Man here with Landon Hall from Fuel Freedom Foundation, Triple F. And we're talking about the movie Pump that's going to be shown at the State Capitol next week at 6 p.m. on the 22nd. And get up there and go to Eventbrite and pull down some tickets so you can make sure you get a seat in there. But thanks for joining us, Landon.
It's okay.
Oh, It's been a long week. Landon, thanks for being with us. And let's talk a little bit more about octane. You mentioned that there's actually with the new standards coming out, there's actually more and more demand for more refined fuels, and actually ethanol kind of hits that button, right?
Right. Well, the federal fuel efficiency standards for vehicles, the CAFE standards, which stands for Corporate Average Fuel Economy, they're having a midterm review. This is put together by the EPA and the National Highway Transportation Association and California's Air Resources Board here in California. And they're trying to ultimately get to an average of 54.5 miles per gallon by model year 2025, which sounds like it's beyond reach, but they keep making incremental progress. And from the automakers we've talked to and the people we've talked to, they're looking at the need for a higher octane fuel and a higher octane rating at the pump to be able to design these high compression engines of tomorrow that are going to help reach those fuel economy standards, to use less gas and to produce less emissions, which is bad for air quality and the environment. And part of what we're saying, and this does get back to ethanol, which is sort of a natural octane booster, that if you have sort of a higher octane, which sort of delays the spark ignition in an engine, that gives you the ability to design these higher compression engines that you need, and that results in better fuel efficiency and less emissions. And for years and years, lead was the preferred additive in gasoline to achieve that high octane rating. That way you could take an inherently sort of low octane fuel processed at the refinery and elevate it up there to the minimum standards. Right now it's 87, and then we got rid of lead because it was harmful neurologically, especially with children. And the aromatics that came in after that were also harmful for groundwater supplies. And so now it's just a matter of finding the right blend for refiners. And ethanol may be a cheaper sort of additive that they can use. So if they can use more of that to achieve that minimum octane rating, that's a substance that you can drop in there, and it does have achieve the benefits of cleaner burning. It has about 33% fewer life cycle emissions when it comes to greenhouse gases. So I think the octane issue is one that's kind of making its way around the country. It's been getting more media coverage over here on the mainland as we come closer to this midterm review that the government's going to put out, and we're hoping and encouraging others to weigh in once that report is out, hopefully sometime this summer, to kind of weigh in with what's important to them, and maybe we can make a difference. I think this is an example of the federal government not being immovable. We can really, say what we want and the fuel choice we want, and hopefully they'll listen.
Yeah, and actually we kind of get a multiplying factor when you start talking about hybrids too, because the hybrid electric drivetrains are very efficient to begin with, and then when you use them in conjunction with maybe an ethanol fuel that again is even cleaner and better, you get a more of a logarithmic progression rather than a linear progression in fuel savings and air quality when you start talking about hybrid engines that also run off renewables that are like ethanol. So how's California doing on the hybrids? Are they being touted and pushed and the dealers selling them? Or?
Yeah, well, I think California is ahead of the game as far as the rest of the country and in a lot of places in the world as far as EV adoption. I see it every day on the freeways. I myself drive a Ford C-Max Energy hybrid. It only goes 21 miles on an electric charge, but that's enough to get me to work where I can charge it in the garage. And you see a lot of these vehicles. There's a lot in the state of California which has a fairly generous sort of kickback for users in addition to the federal subsidy. And why the automakers continue to make these vehicles, I mean, they're expensive to research and design, but they get a real sweetener as far as the credits under the CAFE standards. And if those are continued, you'll see them making more of those. But the credit only applies if they can sell those to the public. And when gas prices are fairly low, then the public is less inclined to buy electric vehicles, which, you know, can still be expensive. And there's always the, you know, if people live in an apartment building, for instance, they may not be able to charge efficiently. So there are a few obstacles, but if those credits stay in there at the level they are now, they'll continue to build, you know, new models. There's always you know, cool new cars that come out that are all electric or some kind of hybridization. But this is the point we've been making, that high octane fuels working in concert with electrification could get you some real benefits in terms of miles per gallon and emissions, you know, since EVs are zero emission.
Right. Like I've told our audience before that one of my prime contractors here is a company called US Hybrid, and they specialize in hybrid drivetrains. Mm-hmm. So I got my early education in hybrid electric vehicles from them. And what they basically told me was the big problem with internal combustion engines is traffic, because internal combustion engines aren't very efficient to begin with. They're only about 25 to 30% efficient. But when you're in traffic, the efficiency can go as low as 4 or 5%, you know, and just be totally a waste of fuel. So when you have a hybrid electric drivetrain that's a gas-powered engine running a generator, you can increase the mileage quite a bit and the range of the vehicle quite a bit by using a high-efficiency internal combustion engine on an electric drivetrain as a hybrid. So that's where I think this ethanol piece could come in really, really, really well.
We know that we don't go around saying that we want to end oil or that we're running out of oil. We know that, you know, when gas prices are low, people drive the cars they like to drive. That means pickups and crossovers and SUVs, and we want people to have vehicle choice as well as fuel choice. To be able, nobody should be limited to driving tiny fuel efficient vehicles, and I don't think that will ever happen. But if we can acknowledge that internal combustion engine vehicles are going to be around for a long, long time, what can we do to make those more fuel efficient? And you're right, the hybridization, when you're stuck in traffic and the stop and start and cold start, that's where a lot of the emissions come from. Right. And so we've done a lot in this country to reduce emissions from stationary sources like power plants and factories. But it's much harder to get a handle around 250 million, you know, gas-powered cars in light-duty cars in the country. So if we can focus on that, we can have a real impact.
Exactly. Well, Landon, thanks again for joining us today. We're plumb out of time and looking forward to seeing Pump the Movie at the state capitol next week. I want to thank you for not only joining us today, but please extend our gratitude to the folks that put the movie together. It's a great film, and we're looking forward to showing it to our public at least one more time. Maybe we can get it out there a few more times. And thank you so much for being with us today, and hope you come back with another movie here pretty soon the weekend of the show.
We would love that. Hope you all enjoy the film, and thanks so much for your interest.
Aloha.
Mahalo. Aloha to you.
All right. Thanks for joining us today on Stan the Energy Man. We'll be back with you next week, and hopefully have even more exciting stuff to show you, because next week is Verge, the State Energy Office's big energy conference. So we'll bring some new info from there. Aloha.
All right, Stan, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Landon.
All right, have a great
All right.